I have activated my wildcard ahead of game week 10, and in this video I'm going to reveal exactly what my draft looks like alongside the essential players that you need to own in your wildcard team. So as always, make sure you do drop a like on this video and of course smash that subscribe button. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So first up, I want to talk about those players that I think are essential for anybody that is looking to wildcard in game week 10, and I have them on the screen right now. So first up, in between the sticks, Areola at West Ham. The long-term fixtures of West Ham are pretty decent, and at 4.2 million for a starting goalkeeper, I think that is such good FPL value. He's been ticking over really nicely. Yes, they didn't pick up a clean sheet in game week 9 against Aston Villa, but I do foresee clean sheets in the future for them, and it doesn't look like his position is up for grabs right now with the competition of Fabianski. So if you're looking maybe as Areola as your starting goalkeeper, or even as part of a rotation, I think he's just the ideal keeper, and I actually think he's better than some of the 4.5 million ones out there. So he is locked into my game week 10 wildcard draft. Moving into the defenders, and I have 3 players here that I think are essential for a game week 10 wildcard. However, there is a slight caveat on Matty Cash. So I personally think he's essential for my team because I've owned him since he was 4.7 million. So I've built up loads of value in him. However, if you're looking to buy him from scratch right now at about 5.1 million, I get it. It's quite a big investment right now. So I do think maybe even the likes of Pau Torres, if you really like the Villa fixtures, is the route to go for. Yes, I think Cash is a better option, but is he better by 0.6 million? Probably not. So I think a Villa defender is looking pretty good. Cash for me is essential if you already have owned him in previous game weeks. Another one of those is going to be Gabriel. The Arsenal fixtures are turning really good now for the long term. And yes, he doesn't offer the attacking potential that Matty Cash might do, but at 4.7 million as an entry point into that Arsenal defence, I think that is just simple value that you can't ignore right now in the game. I think Raya might be a good pickup, but we never know if he might get rotated at any point with Ramsdale. I think Gabriel's minutes look pretty locked in right now in that Arsenal defence. And last up is going to be Liverpool Shimikas. Now I get it. He could easily lose his spot to Joe Gomez later down the line. But at 4.5 million or 4.4 for those that invested last game week, it just feels like FPL gold right now if he does continue to play as a left back in this Liverpool team. And I think it's worth the punt, knowing that in game week 11 or 12, if he is to lose his place in the team, we can simply use a free transfer to downgrade him or simply bench him for a couple of game weeks while the team starts to restructure and get an understanding whether he is going to be long-term on the bench for Liverpool or not. Now, moving into the midfield, this has been quite an obvious pick here. Saka for Arsenal, I think he is still the best Arsenal pick. Sometimes on penalties, guaranteed game time. The only thing I would say is, of course, he has had slight injury concerns. So I want to monitor the press conferences from Arteta ahead of game week 10. If he's good and he gets through the Champions League, he will be an essential pick in that game week 10 wildcard. And the other one, the man who's been decimating my rank, is going to be Mo Salah. 12.7 million. It's a lot to pay, but I think it's worth it. He's the only Liverpool player I can confidently say he's going to play week in, week out on penalties. He isn't actually playing amazing looking at his numbers, but he's so consistent. And with the fixtures coming up, I think it is impossible to ignore him over the coming game weeks. Last up, the front two. I would love to go without Ollie Watkins. He has been a big pain in my rank over the last few weeks, and I'd love to swing against him. But with Luton at home, it's impossible to ignore right now. Maybe in a few game weeks' time, I could look to move away from Watkins, but I have to go with him in the game week 10 wildcard because of those amazing fixtures, starting with Luton at home. And last up, Erling Haaland. I get it. Some managers want to go without him. For me, he is a non-negotiable. He is in the team and is a captaincy option for multiple game weeks over the coming weeks. So those are my game week 10 essentials. Let's move into some of these drafts and the fixtures that we need to target. Okay, so as always, when you are building a wildcard team, we need to look at the teams that have the best fixtures over a 5 or 6 game week period, because that is the horizon that we're looking at for our players. Now, I've taken the fixture difficulty from Fantasy Football Fix, but I've slightly adapted it. I've taken out teams like Luton, Sheffield United, because I simply am not going to consider players from those teams. So as you can see over this period, Crystal Palace topped the ticker over the next 6 game weeks. But from an attacking perspective, I have no interest from them right now. But defensively, I do like the look of maybe a Mark Guy or an Anderson as just a simple player to come in and rotate with other defenders in my team. Unfortunately, there aren't any defenders in that Crystal Palace team that offer the clean sheet and attacking potential that we always sought after. But still, I think Mark Guy is definitely on the watch list for that team. Arsenal, we knew were going to be on this ticker here. I only think Gabriel on the defence is worth considering. Ben White is quite expensive, Saliba too expensive, and Zinchenko is now what I would deem a bit of a rotation risk with Tomiyasu. So I think Gabriel is the defender to target, and in the midfield, I like the looks of Martinelli. Saka is the one that I think is essential, and of course Martin Odegaard. But he has been coming off slightly early in the games where they are chasing a goal, and that has surprised me over the last few weeks. Liverpool, as I mentioned, an absolute essential team, but Tsimikas and Salah are the only ones that I think I could invest in. Defensively, I don't like anybody outside of that. And in the midfield department, Luis Diaz looks great, but of course we have competition from the likes of Jota and Darwin Núñez. And Núñez is a player I would love to invest in, but I simply cannot trust the minutes that he has right now. And if it's a decision between Núñez or Watkins, there's only one winner of that in Watkins. Look at the other teams. West Ham, the only player I'm looking at right now is going to be a Jared Bowen or a Thomas Souček at a cheap price of 4.9 million. Looking at those fixtures, the home game against Everton, Forest and Palace, I think there are goals in those fixtures for those players. The one that's really keeping my attention right now, and I know a lot of wildcarders in Game Week 8 will not have investment in, is going to be Brighton. You can see the fixtures are unbelievable for them, but the Europa League alongside these fixtures make me a little bit worried about the minutes. The only player I think I would consider is going to be Matoma, and also a Stupinan if he is confirmed fit for Game Week 10. But Matoma is just one of those players I would love to own, but do not know if he's going to start week in, week out over that period. A couple other teams to mention. Aston Villa, I've discussed those. Cash, Watkins, Pau Torres, Diaby, all players on my radar, and rightly so. However, after Game Week 12, maybe a sell after that period. Not really looking at Wolves and Brentford. Newcastle are interesting. Yes, I would love to keep Trippier in my wildcard team, but it's proven very difficult, which I will touch on in a minute. And the forwards are impossible to own right now, not knowing which one is going to start week in, week out. The ones I want to address quickly. Man City, I would love to own other Man City players, but very difficult with that fixture ticker that they have there. United, I simply cannot trust. I've owned Rashford and Fernandes for 8 game weeks. There is no world I put them in my wildcard. And Chelsea and Spurs down the bottom. They are right down the bottom of this fixture ticker. But I don't think it's as bad as what it seems. The reason being, no European football for these two teams. They are completely focused on the fixture in hand. With Spurs' attack right now, I think they could score against any team. And I think it's only the City one that's actually making it look bad over that period. Chelsea's slightly more difficult. Spurs, City and Newcastle in a 3 isn't ideal, but after the performance against Arsenal, I think this is a Chelsea team that's starting to find their feet, and they do have some cheap assets like a Cole Palmer, who has featured in a lot of my wildcard drafts. So without further ado, let's get into some of the wildcard drafts that I've been building ahead of Game Week 10. Okay, so first up, a wildcard team that I've built for Game Week 10. It's worth noting it isn't my current draft, but it is one that I am tempted by, and it is a 3-4-3 draft. So basically, this one very different to the other two that I've built because it focuses on 3 big forwards, and those are going to be Watkins, Haaland and Julian Alvarez. Now, I would love to put Darwin Núñez in this team, but from my team value perspective, very difficult to feature him in. And also the minutes are a big worry for Darwin Núñez. Someone like Julian Alvarez, who continues to score in this Man City team, is a tough player to ignore right now. And while the other players are kind of the shiny toys in the Watkins, with this team I get myself Haaland, Watkins and Alvarez. I think that's a really powerful triple up right now going into the upcoming game weeks. Looking at the midfield, as I mentioned, I would play a 3-4-3 and it would feature having Cole Palmer as the first sub. But knowing that he can integrate into the team if there was a situation where maybe one of my forwards minutes were looking a little bit risky, or of course one of the defenders as well, where we could slightly change the formation to a 4-4-2 and bring Cole Palmer in as a rotation alongside a Diaby or a Bowen. Of course, the essentials in this team, Saka and Salah in the midfield, but I think Bowen and Diaby are excellent value at their price points. My only concern is that they're very popular players for wildcarders in Game Week 8, so I'm starting to move towards what the template was a few weeks back, but I don't think that should be an issue. The good players are good players for a reason, and if you continue to ignore them because others own them, I don't think that's a good FPL mindset to have over the long term. And look at the defence. Cash Gabriel Shimikas, part of those essentials that I mentioned. And I've got Lascelles in there as a cheap punt. 3.9 million, while Botman remains out and we think he could be out for a few more game weeks. He looks like a great investment, knowing that once he loses his place in the team, he will revert back to the fifth spot, the third spot on my bench. And your doggy as well. I would prefer that to be Pedro Porro, and it's worth noting, I'm not even hugely bullish on the Spurs defence with the fixtures coming up. But having your doggy since day one, I've built up a lot of value in him, and I do think he does offer good balance in this team right now. Spurs defensively look better than what I thought. He doesn't offer the attacking potential that I thought he would, though, over the last few weeks. So he is one to monitor right now. I don't think Spurs defense is essential, but while I've built up the value in him, I don't think there's many better defenders right now outside of maybe Crystal Palace's Mark Guy, but doesn't really offer the attacker potential to justify picking him over Udogie right now. So that's a 3-4-3 wildcard that I like. I really do like it, but I do like having the powerful midfielders alongside some other Spurs picks in there. So I'm going to move on to another team that I think is in my consideration right now. Okay, so next up is what I would deem to be the big 5 wildcard draft. And those are going to be 5 players that I think are just the most powerful players in the game right now. And that is going to include Saka, Salah, Son, Watkins, and Erling Haaland. Basically, the best player from their respective teams. So as I mentioned, Saka and Salah essential for a wildcard 10 draft alongside Watkins and Haaland. But this team gets me Son as well at 9.5 million. Now, of course, that's a big investment for a player like that alongside all the other premiums that I have in this team. But with the side that I've selected here, it means that I have to go for some slightly cheaper options in the different positions. And that is going to include a huge downgrade to Chelsea's Cole Palmer. Now, look at the assets right now at 4.9 million. He is the best of the bunch in my eyes. The penalty taker in this Chelsea team. And for those that have watched Chelsea right now, he is offering something slightly different to what all of the other wingers in that Chelsea team can offer. Now, as I mentioned, the fixtures of Chelsea are not good. It is worth noting. And Cole Palmer could be deemed a rotation risk or a minutes risk. But what I've seen with my own eyes right now, Cole Palmer is pretty essential to the way that Chelsea are building up play. Dropping in off that right flank into those half spaces, I don't see the likes of Madueke having the kind of football intelligence right now to do that, even though he is a very good player. Yes, we could see a situation where he plays Mudryk and Sterling on the wings with Broha or Jackson down the middle, but then that really does change the way that he is building up phases of play. And right now, I think Cole Palmer is very, very important to the way that he is building up transitions. So I think Cole Palmer is an enabler that I don't think needs to be overlooked right now. And with the way that Chelsea's playing, I think goals are starting to come in this system. And with him being a penalty taker, even though he's 4.9 million, I'm not looking at him as a 4.9 million player. And with this team, I would have to play a 3-5-2 formation, meaning I would have to play Cole Palmer week in, week out, or rotate with a defender, which isn't necessarily ideal. But I think Cole Palmer is going to be one of those players that gets completely overlooked. And I'm actually considering him just being straight into my wildcard team, knowing that if he loses his place, I do have a defender waiting in the wings to replace him as an auto sub if he doesn't come onto the pitch, of course. So the other changes with this team is basically that the defense stays the exact same. So the investment really is going big with Son, but obviously downgrading the likes of a Bowen to a Cole Palmer, which means I am getting a slight minutes risk. But I think this is someone who's a brilliant option at 4.9 million. So this is the big 5 wildcard. I really do like it, but there is another team that I'm slightly leaning towards right now, and that is going to be my current wildcard draft. And this right here is what my current wildcard team is looking at. Now, again, it is very early on. It's only Monday in the week. So much can happen over the midweek with the fixtures. So I'm just going to read through the entire team right now because, as I mentioned, this is how my current wildcard team is looking. So Turner and Areola in goal. Areola, as I mentioned, I'm happy to have long-term in my team because if Turner loses his place, Areola is great as a number 1 goalkeeper. Looking at the defence, Cash Gabriel Shimikas, the essentials. Lascelles is the 3.9 rotation for that Newcastle defence. I know he will lose his place once Botman returns. And Pedro Porro. Now, with this team that I've built, I had a bit of money in the bank and I looked at it and thought, if I'm going to have a Spurs player, I want the best of the bunch. And that is going to be Pedro Porro right now. Now, it's worth noting, I don't think Spurs defender is essential by any means. And that easily could get downgraded to other options in the game, like a Crystal Palace defender, which I am leaning towards right now after filming this video, it is worth noting. But I also think a Stupinan at Brighton is someone who could raise his hand once again. If De Zerbi comes out and says that he's available for the weekend and how the team have missed him, maybe I downgrade Pedro Porro to a Stupinan with those amazing Brighton fixtures, knowing what an amazing asset he can be for both clean sheet and attacking potential. So that's one to monitor right now. And of course, a perfect reason to follow the account, as I will be updating you with my wildcard draft throughout the week. Moving into the midfield, the big difference here is that I've gone for the double Arsenal midfield of Saka and Martinelli. With that Sheffield United at home fixture, I really think it's a great opportunity to swing against those that wildcarded in game week 8 and go for that double up of those attackers. I think Arsenal are going to be out for blood after that draw against Chelsea. They need a reaction with the performance that they put in. Now, one would argue maybe Martinelli could be at risk with Trossard coming on and scoring, but I don't really think Martinelli is a huge rotation risk. I think he's a minutes risk, maybe comes off around 70, but I don't deem him as losing his place in the team. I think he's quite important to the way that Arteta wants to play, with Martinelli stretching the game, and I really like the double up with him alongside Saka. Now, you notice Cole Palmer is also in the team, and I get it. I would have to play him week in, week out with this team. But as I said, I think he's a brilliant player at 4.9 million. I expect him to retain his place in that Chelsea team. And the fixture this weekend at home against Brentford, I actually think is quite a good one and could be a brilliant differential while others can't get to him. Last up, Maddison in that midfield. Spurs looking great offensively. Yes, I don't have Son, but while Son continues to come off early in games, I'd rather go for the player that I know is going to play 90, 95 minutes week in, week out, the hub of that team. The only problem with his goal scoring numbers have dropped off since Son has played as the number 9. So I do know that I'm getting more of an assist merchant than a goal scorer, which can be a little bit of an issue. Last up, the front three haven't changed. Watkins, Haaland and Archer. I would love to be a little bit different, but Watkins is killing me right now. And for the next 3, I don't see a world where I can't own him, knowing that I can come off him after that period and go for a slightly more differential forward. But I think it would be very brave of me to go without Watkins in my wildcard team. So that is how my team is currently looking. Lots can change. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's video looking at those Game Week 10 wildcard drafts. Really hope it's provided some value. And as always, if you did enjoy it, please do consider dropping a like and smashing that subscribe button. And also, let me know in the comments, are you currently on your wildcard coming into this weekend? That just leaves me to say thank you so much for tuning in. Have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.